This is a Bandit Radio production.
Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep things interesting. Welcome to Out of My League, presented by Bandit Radio. I'm Nick Diaz. What I'm going to do right now is defend recruiting rankings and then tell you why they're overrated. I'm going to contradict myself in this podcast. So the early signing period started yesterday, and while these are not the final rankings for the most part, these will be the top six in some order: Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, Oregon. Now, here's an interesting tweet that went around yesterday. Matt Schick of ESPN tweeted, "There are only 6 programs that have won a game, at least one game, in the college football playoff. Only 6 have won at least one game in the playoff. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, LSU, Clemson, and Oregon." The updated 2021 recruiting class rankings are as follows: Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, LSU, Clemson, and Oregon are all in the top 6 in that order. And the team that's been to the college football playoff multiple years but has yet to win a playoff game is Oklahoma. And they're number 7, right behind Oregon. So yes, recruiting rankings matter. Now let me tell you why they're overrated. Yesterday, Nick Saban went on or maybe it was this morning, Nick Saban went on the Dan Patrick Show, and he shared a story about losing out on a little recruit you may have heard about. He said, quote, "One of the hardest things about recruiting is that you really develop relationships with certain players as you recruit them. And it's very disappointing when you have a close relationship with a guy and then the guy goes someplace else." Saban said, "Not only do you have that, but now you have to play against him. That's one of the hardest things." Leonard Fournette comes to mind. "I had a really good relationship with him. His mom made me crawfish etouffee, and it was the best meal and all that. You think you have a chance to get the guy, and then you don't. It's disappointing, not only because of the relationship style you have developed with players, but also with the family." Interesting he mentions Leonard Fournette because he kicked Leonard Fournette's ass 3 years in a row. 2014, Leonard Fournette didn't really play a lot, but LSU ended up losing in overtime. Now, 2015, if you remember, Leonard Fournette was the Heisman frontrunner, and it was all but his going into November. And he went in to number 4 ranked Alabama. And if you remember, Leonard Fournette had 19 carries for 31 yards. 2016, Coach O was the interim. Alabama comes to town in Tiger Stadium. Leonard Fournette has 17 carries, 35 yards. Now, you must be asking yourself, well, how could this happen? Well, we know how. The quarterback, the system. Part of that was Les Miles. Most of it was Les Miles. But more specifically, LSU got dominated on the line of scrimmage, and specifically the offensive line. You can't just look at the rankings, but specifically looking under the hood. 2019 LSU Tigers, maybe the greatest team ever. Let's look at the previous 3 recruiting classes for LSU prior to that 2019 season. They were number 7 in 2017, number 15 in 2018, and then they finished number 5 right in the 2019 signing class. That had Derek Stingley as a freshman. This is the greatest team in the history of college football. 7, 15, and 5 were your main contributors on that team. 7, 15, and 5. Clemson, 2016. This was their second straight national championship appearance, and they finally beat Alabama on the last play with 1 second remaining. This 2016 Clemson team, the previous recruiting classes ranked 16, 9, and 11. 16, 9, and 11. Now, how could this have happened if this contradicts everything that I said from that tweet about all those teams that had won at least one college football playoff game and they're all ranked in the top 6. Roster management. If you ask any NFL general manager, this is what they've said for years, and you can tell if your team that you root for in the NFL is building a team the right way in the draft. They all have this saying: you build a team from the inside out, not the outside in, meaning you start with the line of scrimmage, offensive and defensive linemen and quarterbacks, and then you move outside as you build your roster to running backs, tight ends, receivers, cornerbacks, safeties. You build from the inside out, not the outside in. Now, while this LSU recruiting class is really good, it has a lot of great defensive linemen as well. It's got a lot of bells and whistles. It's got a lot of bells and whistles. Now, why is LSU having this problem for this year? I was texting someone yesterday, this person's an LSU fan, and they asked me, so did we just not recruit any offensive linemen this year? No. I explained the problem is that Louisiana does not produce great offensive linemen on a consistent basis. They do occasionally, but not on a consistent basis. So in years like this, where you don't have a great crop of offensive linemen in state, you have to go out of state, and LSU has to go out of state. That means it's harder to recruit kids out of state, especially in a COVID year. So you get screwed over a little bit. Now, the good news for LSU is that 5-star offensive tackle Tristan Lee will not sign until February, and you're still in on him for that. And there are multiple grad transfers, the number 1 JUCO offensive lineman that LSU's in on, as well as a potential flip that LSU could get from an FSU commit who's a 4-star offensive tackle, I believe. But point is this, word of advice, when looking at recruiting rankings, yes, recruiting rankings matter. But if you're trying to build a program going forward, look under the hood and see if there is substance to it. Inside out, not outside in. Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, or follow me on Twitter at @TheNickDiaz.